Hi everybody, welcome to our Hangout with the Buck Institute for Education. I'm John Larmer, the Editor-in-Chief here at BIE, so welcome everyone. This is our first Hangout of the new year, 2016, and we're continuing to talk about our model for gold standard project-based learning. And today we're talking about one of the project-based teaching practices, which you can see a diagram of right there, and this is all on our website. You can read more about this at bie.org. Today we're talking about scaffolding student learning with 3 of our national faculty. So more on that in a second. I just want to mention that this all comes also from a book I was a co-author of, which we just published with ASCD, and you can see that on our website's online store also. And this describes more about our model for gold standard project-based learning and the research behind it. So let's hear who our guests are, some of our distinguished national faculty. So Dory, tell us who you are and where you are.
Hi, my name is Dory Berg, and I currently reside in Dallas, Texas. My current role is working with secondary humanities teachers in an instructional coaching position. I help those teachers create their projects. It's a 100% project-based learning school, so they do go from project to project throughout the entire school year. And I also work with them on instructional practices in their classrooms.
Okay, all right, welcome from Dallas. And Georgette.
Hi, I am Georgette Baltierez Monohorta, and I live in Whittier, California. And I currently teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math and science for students with special needs, mild to moderate students with special needs.
Okay, welcome from LA. All right, and George.
Thank you, John. My name is George Valenzuela, and I currently serve Richmond Public Schools, Dannon, Virginia, as an instructional specialist in the areas of technology and engineering, trade and industrial education, and I am also a national faculty member with BIE.
All right. All right, well, thanks, guys, for joining us today from all over the country. And I've got a few questions I'll toss out to you guys for conversation. And folks, if you have any questions out there, please enter them on our Google Plus events page on the Q&A feature there. And I'll see them and relay them to our guests, or we might answer some at the very end, or we could answer some also on the Google Plus events page after the Hangout if we don't have time to get to them today. We'll go for about half an hour, and by the way, this Hangout will be archived at bie.org, so if you miss it or miss part of it or want to share it with friends or colleagues, you can find it in the archive at bie.org resources. So let's get going. So scaffolding, what do we mean by scaffolding, and why is it important enough to be on the list of gold standard project-based teaching practices? And a little addendum to that question I thought of is planning scaffolding in PBL different from traditional teaching? What do you guys think?
I'll start off and address the second question, which was really why, in my opinion, why this is one of the PBL best teaching practices. Something when we're discussing student learning and thinking about our lessons, it's really important to consider and make sure that our goal is that each individual student is learning, that we're there to make sure that all students achieve their goals, and looking at how we break down those lessons from start to finish to make sure that they're all successful. So it's not just, are they successful because they're a good group together, but is each individual student meeting their needs? And so that's why I believe that it really is an important part of our teaching practices in PBL.
Okay, thanks, Jordan.
It's a little bit even more focused in special ed because I have to take into account also their yearly goals or yearly IEP goals come into play. So I have to take those into account while I'm planning the big picture, the big project, and build those scaffolds in to ensure that those students are meeting those goals and fulfilling their needs.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what Dory and Georgette said. I think as far as planning for scaffolds in PBL versus traditional teaching, I'd say that there really shouldn't be a difference because gold standard PBL is a good, solid instructional approach for teaching and learning, and really all learning needs to be supported.
All right. All right, thanks, guys, for that intro. Yeah, good point, George. It's not that different. It's good teaching practice, period, to provide scaffolding for what students need. differentiation and so forth. So let's hear about some project-based, some project examples, and talk more about how scaffolding looks in a PBL environment. So when designing a project, how does the teacher determine what scaffolding to use with students?
Well, I think one piece with when you're planning a project, it's different in the traditional sense where sometimes even if you're planning ahead, you're only planning maybe week to week. Whereas in project-based learning, you really are trying to come up with the entire project to make sure that there's alignment from start to finish and everything that falls in between. And so when you're planning for that scaffolding, really breaking down the lessons, and again, that alignment piece I think is very, very important. Looking at the lessons, aligning them back to the standards, and breaking the standards down to think and really foreshadow where your students might have some hiccups.
Right.
So, and that's where the similarity is with teaching, in traditional teaching as well, is you're going to come across some topics and you're going to have an idea of where students might struggle more, whereas in other areas you could do a quick 20-minute lesson and they're probably going to get it and you can move on as a whole group. So in regards to planning for it, I think breaking down and looking at the standards and aligning that within your project is an important piece.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, Dory.
Yeah,
and
I just want to echo.
Sorry, George. No,
it's okay.
I agree with that, Dory, and in addition to that, I like how you said we plan the whole project and you look at the individual lessons and see what is needed, what the students will need to learn. Also looking at those prerequisite skills that are needed in order for those students to achieve that level of learning. Even going back, I know I teach middle school, but I teach middle school for students with exceptional needs. And sometimes I have to go back even further down, going back into the elementary school level standards to see, what are those prerequisite skills, what are those foundational skills that I need to reteach or introduce so that the students can reach that level of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to echo both from Dory and Georgette. I don't currently teach students, but I see my teachers using a variety of scaffolds in their lessons, and our programs focus on engineering design, and so that design thinking is built in. And a scaffold that we actually use is connecting to background knowledge. And this is a great way for a teacher to operate in the rigor level that is appropriate to the grade level that he or she teaches. And I'll explain how. During engineering design challenges, there are pieces of projects that were introduced in a lower grade. For example, a lower grade may have introduced students to simple machines, but that would be identification of simple machines. So students would just need to really know what are a lever, a pulley, a screw, and so forth. But simple machines will, and high products with built-in simple machines. Examples of this are a trebuchet or a catapult, a race car, or even if we're calculating the mechanical advantage of mechanism in compound machines, which is a machine that has two or more simple machines. So the difference here, like Dory and Georgette were explaining, is really the process verb versus when they were little, they identified. Now we want them to analyze and also apply. So that vertical alignment is very important.
Okay, all right, thanks, George. I didn't give you a heads up of this question, but I'm just thinking, BIA's planning tool, part of our one-on-one workshop, we introduced the idea of a student learning guide to help teachers plan scaffolding. And the idea there is that you think about the major products of the project and then kind of map backwards. So what skills and knowledge the students need to produce that project, that product. And then, so what do I need to teach them? How do I scaffold that knowledge and skills to help them make that product? Do you guys want to say anything about how that process works or how that tool, you've seen that used by teachers in workshops, since you've led a lot of our workshops? George?
I think that the fourth column of the BIE Student Learning Guide is a great tool for teachers to effectively plan scaffolds for students working on a project. And a good teacher should really have several scaffolds in their teacher toolbox and will use them effectively based on the needs of the kids. So the Student Learning Guide, to me, is a perfect tool for backward design planning. First, a teacher will start with beginning with the end in mind, and he or she will identify what the summative assessments or the products that he or she wants students to complete. Second, she or he should align standards and skills to the products so that they are a direct transfer of learning of the standards and skills. Third, formative assessments are planned to check for understanding. And lastly, that's where the scaffolds and other instructional tools and strategies are identified to support learning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, in addition to that, within that project, in special ed, I use that section to make sure that I plan out the individual needs of my students, because I have a different population or a special population of students. I make sure that I look at each individual student, and when I'm creating that project, make sure that I know what the needs are, and then build scaffolds in accordance to the needs of my individual students as well as the whole group.
Yeah, and I really think that scaffolding piece, it's such a great tool, and I feel like it's a good gut check for teachers because it keeps the focus as well. Mm-hmm. It really helps the teachers narrow down and pick apart where they do think. It allows an opportunity for the teachers to really pick apart where they do think their students might need the help. So as they're using that planning document, I think they've got it right there in front of them, and it helps them scaffold right there.
And it might also help them, like you said, well, I agree with you, it helps them more focus their project and what the learning outcome needs to be or is.
Mm-hmm.
What the
and if folks are interested in that tool, it's on our website under the planning forms section of resources, along with a project overview, a design document. And there are also some filled out examples of this student learning guide we've been referring to. You can see those on our website in that planning forms section. We got a question from a viewer, from Laura, that I think I'll relay to you guys right now. It's a good one. She asks, how much is too much scaffolding? In other words, how do we avoid taking out the authenticity and autonomy for students in PBL? Anyone want to tackle that one? How much is too much?
Well, I think you have to have a true understanding of your students, and you need to be able to have enough supports where their inquiry is still being driven by them for their own learning. However, being able to support them. Some students need a little bit more push, and some students don't. You really need to know your students and know where they need a little bit more push to continue that inquiry, because if you're feeding them all the information, then it's not true project-based learning. So we need to be able to keep the inquiry going.
Yeah. George?
Well, I want to echo Georgette, but also for a lot of teachers that may not be aware, of what scaffolds or even what it is, I'll make an analogy. When a carpenter is building a house, he or she's, they build from the ground up, and they stand on scaffold for support. So in the same way, learning always proceeds from the known and should be supported like the carpenter on the scaffolds. So a good teacher will take that into account and support learning with scaffolding. Also, most importantly, I think, scaffolding is a way to gradually shift the responsibility of learning from the teacher to the student and helps them become independent. When students learn how to learn and work independently, then they will be able to be successful at being interdependent with others.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, Laura, I would just add that in PBL, we take care not to front load too much scaffolding, and so it is important to wait until students say they need it, or you can tell they need it as a teacher, and give it sort of on a just-in-time basis sometimes. There's that need to be flexible on a project, because you're right, you don't want to take away students' autonomy any more than you have to. All right, let's hear about some actual projects. So, guys, tell me some examples of projects that you've taught or you've seen taught, and some examples of the scaffolding in those projects.
One of our most recent projects with our 9th grade humanities team, and again, it's English and social studies, which is world geography content here in Texas for 9th graders. And they're doing a project where they're taking films Their focus is Asia, and they're really focusing on all of Asia. So they're trying to spread it out, but they're looking at physical features, but they're also looking. A big emphasis is on population pyramids and understanding population pyramids and how you can look at a population pyramid and really depict what it's saying about that country. So, you know, looking at it and trying to make some inferences on, you know, like looking at birth rate and death rate, for example. What does that say about possible health care in that country and availability to the citizens? So they're correlating some of this with some films that have in various parts of Asia, and they're doing sort of a film festival and looking at depictions of the film and seeing if it's accurate according to what it really is like in that country. And so obviously one of the big pieces is understanding population pyramids. And if anybody's ever tried to teach that to students, it's a very, very tough concept initially to just even understand how to read it, let alone try to project some other learning on it. So one of the scaffolding pieces that the teachers are prepared for, this is an upcoming project. They have not yet rolled this out, and it will be in a couple weeks. But one of the projections with scaffolding is knowing that population pyramids is a very tough concept. And so they're trying to come up with actual stations, and they're going to have the students circulate within the stations, but one of those stations is going to be sitting and meeting with the teacher. Now, that's an optional station. And if you pass a couple of stations first in your understanding of population pyramids and being able to break it down and then foreshadowing other ones and even creating their own, if you're able to kind of quote unquote pass those stations, then you can skip the teacher station and actually go and apply it to your project. Whereas it's kind of a stop halt sign for anybody who weren't able to pass those first initial stations after some teacher-led instruction at the beginning of class, and then they would actually meet individually, you know, or a small group with the teacher and break down population pyramids, and he or she would really go a little bit more in depth in that. So that was one way that we're looking at scaffolding that.
Okay, so the project that I'm thinking about is a project having to do with my students created scale models for homes, and then they created a budget to furnish these homes that they were creating. So we use proportions, we use scales, and we use percent increase, decrease, budgeting. So for all of those in my classroom, like I said, depending on the need of the student, some students needed more help with multiplying and dividing decimals, you know, adding those in, so they would receive supports in that. Other students needed extra help in being able to calculate a proportion, so being able to scale that up, and so they would receive more supports than that. Now, in my classroom, it's a little bit more, since I have a smaller population, sometimes I have an extra aide, so that I work like you said, workshops, where the aide might run a review lesson of some sort, and I might be working with another group on something else. Another support that could be, because I have so many different needs in the classroom, social needs as well. So some of the scaffolds that I might use are different kinds of like supports to help them with communicating with each other within the groups themselves.
Thank you. So my program area, and I don't teach, I'm responsible for the instructional practices of the teachers in the area, has transitioned from industrial arts to technology education, and now it's technology and engineering. So in studying the work of Jerome Bruner, who is credited with developing the scaffolding learning theory, he maintained that students learn by categorizing in terms of differences and similarities, and also human interaction. And this works really well with tapping into prior knowledge and introducing new tools or materials and grouping them with ones that the students previously used. And I'll just give you an example. We are now introducing CAD and 3D printers as tools for making prototypes and models. So we actually have group these with the hand and power tools that our students have previously used in their designs. And also now with Maker Education, electronics and microcontrollers like Arduino, see that, are being introduced as tools and materials that our students can use along with the previously used ones. And this is a great way for introducing topics in computer science like coding and computer programming to our students. And another scaffold that we use is showing students what they're expected to do. So if you see me work on the technology or using this tool, then you do the same thing.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, because I completely forgot one of my pieces, and it would really go with anything that any of us said as well, is the use of workshops. So that was a lesson of that I had explained with the 9th grade humanities project. But one piece that our district is really working on is incorporating workshops. And workshops take place, I would say, almost every single day, if not every other day, within every classroom. And it's based almost, I'd say, 95% off of exit slips. The teachers really use different types of formative assessments throughout the class period, but then they always have exit slips. And based off of those, they put them into 3 different piles. A couple of them are silly. Like one of the piles is, okay, I've got this. I'm pretty good to go. The middle pile is, I'm still struggling a little bit, but I'm close. And then the third pile, which is kind of funny, we always say, were you even in my classroom today? So there was some disconnect. Whether it was the student or teacher, it doesn't matter, but there was disconnect, and the student didn't get it. And so we really want to make sure that we are focusing in a deeper way with that. I'm not even sure I was in your class today. And so they will sometimes come up with their workshops, and if they're working on their project, if they have a project work day, for example, the teacher might introduce the lesson, get them all going, and then say, okay, I need these 7 people over at my table. We're going to do a 5-minute quick lesson just to get you back up to speed and put you back into the group. And sometimes that includes the special education students, but sometimes not. And so what's nice is if we do have that special education teacher, they can only be in classrooms every once in a while. Or if we have the aide, or if we have an additional teacher, we are able to utilize that. But the teachers have been working on setting up the expectations with the students that they are self-directing if they're not in the workshop. What we're trying to get to, and it's hard, it's a heavy feat, but instead of me saying, okay, I need these 7 students in this workshop, we're trying to get the students to take ownership of their learning and say, hey, I need to be in that workshop. And so getting them to be more self-directed and acknowledge that they're not quite where they need to be with the learning and get them there. So we're still working that out. It's not perfect, but that's our end goal.
That's a scaffold within itself, huh?
Yeah.
Scaffold to teach them how to do that, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Now, how about my last question is about common pitfalls or challenges teachers face when planning scaffolding in PBL, and of course, how do you suggest people meet those challenges? George?
I think Georgette previously said this, but I think the biggest pitfall for some teachers is not knowing the ability of their students. So you can't plan appropriate scaffolds if you don't know what the kids know and don't know. So I think that building time for pre-assessments are extremely important when you get new students or when you're beginning a new project. And also formative assessments along the way are key for determining if the scaffolds are actually working or not, or should be replaced with others. What works for some students may not work for all, and that's okay. And I just think that our teachers need to understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to reiterate 2 good points George made there, among others. But yeah, knowing your students to help plan scaffolding, and then checking, formative assessment to see if your scaffolding is working. Great points.
I think another struggle is just, the reality of being a teacher. They're doing so many different things every single day, and when it comes down to it, you can't always plan. You think you might leave the classroom and think, I just rocked that lesson. I mean, I should probably be nominated Teacher of the Year. You know, I mean, I nailed it. And then, you know, you did so good, you decide to give them a pop quiz the next day, and everybody bombs it, and you're like, what happened? I know that I did a really great job there. But again, it's not the teacher's fault. It's just for some reason there was a disconnect. And so I think thinking on your feet and changing your lesson and you know, really letting your guard down as a teacher, you had plans for this whole week, and all of a sudden the kids are stumped. And so letting go a little bit and allowing yourself to take that step back and you know, not pushing forward until the kids are ready to jump on.
Mm-hmm. I think in addition to that, so one of the common pitfalls might be, it's just like in traditional teaching, that we don't always foresee what the students need support in. So we might have this great project planned out, and like you said, you know, we find out after this lesson that they really, really need support in another area, maybe a prerequisite skill that they didn't really understand. They're understanding the skill that needs to be learned, but the prerequisite skill is falling back, so that we need to be able to adapt to whatever the students need, whatever their needs are. It's not always going to be planned exactly the way it is, and that's okay. That's just like traditional teaching. It's every day.
Okay. All right, guys. I'll ask you for a final word in a minute. Let me just let our viewers know again. This is archived. It's recorded and archived at bie.org, and I'll be writing a blog about this hangout posted to our website soon. Within a week or two after this hangout, you can see it in writing as well as watch it recorded. And next, we're having another hangout in 2 weeks, talking about our essential project design element in our gold standard model for project-based learning. We're talking about authenticity, how you can make sure your projects are real world for your students. So before I make a final word about that, let's hear a final word from our guests. So anybody want to give our viewers a little encouragement or something you forgot to say or a tip? George.
Well, in the last word, I will personalize mine. I think it's really awesome when a career and a passion merge, and helping others is very important to me, and I feel extremely blessed, extremely fortunate to be working in my current role with my school division, RPS, and also as a national faculty with BIE. At RPS, we have extremely progressive leadership, and as a school division, they've helped us adopt the ACT's framework for college and career readiness. And so systemically adopting the right scaffolds as a school division and also teaching strategies is part of what we do every single day. Some time back, our Associate Superintendent for Academic Services, Ms. Andrea Kane, she advised me on the importance of finding like-minded individuals, and for me, that's the entire academic team at Richmond Public Schools and also BIE. Both BIE and RPS nurture my professional growth and allow me to share this with others in my school division and throughout the whole world. So thank you.
All right. Truly appreciate it, George.
I would just strongly encourage everybody. I really think that planning form that we have, you know, if people aren't already using it, go to bie.org, click on resources and planning documents. It's a really, really good, easy way to get that alignment, and I think the scaffolding pieces will fall in place if you follow the document. So that's a great resource to leave here front with.
And I would like to reiterate too and say that you remember everything that's planned doesn't always go with the plan. You know, just make sure that you're willing to adapt to meet the needs of your students and really understand what those needs are during the project, before the project, and after the project, so that we can help them grow.
All right. Nice words to end by. Thanks, Georgette. All right, so folks, if you have more questions, you can post them to a Google Plus events page, and when you see my blog about this hangout, you can add comments there and chip in your own ideas as well about scaffolding and project-based learning. So we hope you've learned something and enjoyed this hangout. Thanks to my national faculty guests, and we'll see you out there on January 26th talking about authenticity in project design. Bye-bye.